Many people say that they want to write a book, yet 9 out of every 10 people who start writing a book never finish it, leaving one of their biggest dreams unfulfilled. So, what is it about the 1 in 10 people who do finish writing their book? What do they have, and what drives them to complete their books, their plays, and their songs? Welcome to the Editor's Desk, where we explore their writing experiences, their motivations, and their struggles. And now, here are your hosts, author, writing coach, and self-publishing guide, Lynn Everard, and author, Louise Gomez. Good evening and welcome to the Editor's Desk. It is 5:30 p.m. on Thursday afternoon in South Florida. You'll notice I didn't say anything about the weather. And my name is Lynn Everard.
I think you learned that. Hi everybody, this is Louise, and we learn not to say sunny South Florida these days with what's going on with the weather. But
That's
thankfully
right.
we dodged a bullet, I would say. Thankfully we're okay here in
I would say
in
so.
Boca.
Lots to be grateful for.
Very grateful.
But hurricanes, like a lot of other situations in life, can really test all our relationships. And sometimes something as traumatic as a hurricane can push something that maybe was close to the edge over the edge. And one of the things that could be pushed over the edge in a hurricane is a marriage.
Oh yeah.
And fortunately, we have someone here today to help us understand that.
Oh, absolutely. We have Janice Daphne, and she wrote the book, Divorce, the New Little Black Book, which I have to say, I'm shocked that it took me so many years to read it because I got so much value from this. And the reality is, to touch on what you just said about a storm or something that we would go through, I would say what I got out of this and what I got out of my divorce was it made me stronger. And it really, I guess I would say, molded me into the person I am today. And I wanted to read her bio real quick before we introduce her so we can get some info. So Janice Daphne is a South African-born multicultural dynamic speaker, author, and coach, highly intuitive and gifted with a strong discerning spirit. She leads others confidently on their path. Her passion is to empower and equip individuals who find themselves in the transitory phases of their lives. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Louise. This has been a long time in the making. So I'm so thrilled for the opportunity to spend a few moments with you.
Well, we're excited to have you. I know you for 5-6 years now or more, and I'm embarrassed to say I've just read it now. And the reality is, I can say now with conviction, anybody who's even thinking about going through a divorce gets to read this book, because and even Lynn as a guy, I guess he'll tell you his male point of view, but it was so informative. And it was, what I loved about it is you gave a little bit of everything: facts, emotions, and really good life learning lessons.
Thank you so much. When Lynn had made mention early on, she wrote the book. In my head, I'm going, she wrote the book, but she hasn't made the T-shirt yet, so that's to come.
Okay.
But you know, I want to say, before you even get to divorce, because I'm not a proponent for divorce. Divorce, at best, is catastrophic. And it is something that you want as an absolute last tipping point. Like, there is no way out. If you can explore, and if you haven't yet explored, every possible option known to man to salvage your relationship, especially if there are children involved, then you owe it to each other. You owe it to your family to explore that. And only then, and even then, take another hard look. And if it really is something that you need to go through for, then yes. Having this, I think of it as an instructional manual, if you will. Lynn eloquently called it earlier this evening from a male perspective, the logical divorce, because it is written from a point of this catastrophe happened, but now what? Now let's explore now what? You know, and often I think in the beginning stages of the divorce, there are such fragile moments of emotions that comes to the surface that we often forget. And in the book, I make mention that divorce has its own love language, and it's called money.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from a logical standpoint that Lynn had said, you're separating or dissolving a business partnership. And when you dissolve a business partnership, do you go into that process logically thinking what are the next steps? Or do you go into it emotionally head first? Now, you can say that sounds a little cruel or cold, and you would be right. There are elements of that, but I think it's necessary to set up your blueprint for what's to come. You know, in other words, I've heard over the years of coaching women, I've heard the most common line or theme, which is what prompted me to eventually write the instructional manual is, oh, but he did this. Or, oh, but she did this. And we get stuck on the he did, she did, or she said, or the other one is, but I just want to be done with it. I want the kids, I want the house, I want the this. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. You can have all of that. But there's a process to go through this of what's rightfully yours if there aren't any prenups. And even if there are prenups, like stick to it, you know? Because so often women just want to throw in the towel because it's emotionally exhausting. And I know, Louise, you've experienced it. Yours was a year long in the making. It's draining.
It's very draining.
It pulls the reserves that you didn't even know that you had, you know, but to approach it as that business mindset of, let me see what is the logical path of separating this partnership, putting the emotional piece, tacking it on for the box at the end. We're going to get to it, just not right now. Because right now we need our logical brain to think, okay, so this is the finances. How do we separate? What is coming up next? How do I take care of my household with my kids? If you were a single parent and you know, if your spouse, either male or female, was the breadwinner, how are you going to supplement income? Because it's not an automatic that you say, all right, we've come to this terms, we're going to amicably and mutually separate. We're going to go through the process of divorce, that the next month or 2 months or 3 months that you're going to start getting child support payments or alimony payments.
Right.
It's a long process before you get to that. And if you were a stay-at-home parent, you find yourself at the deep end with basically no life jacket to figure out, how am I going to swim? Because if I don't, I'm sinking myself and whoever, you know, how many kids you're bringing down with you. And so the book I wrote from a point of the explosion of what happened, the acknowledgement of what happened, of here we are. Okay, now let's deal with it. And deal with it in the facets of the financial piece, the therapy piece.
I know. I loved how you kept going in between each chapter. You always put that little reminder, because I know it has helped you so much going through the therapy and sorting out all of those emotions.
Yeah, therapy rocks, and not just for you, the person or the spouse going through it, but also if you have children. And how young, it's up to you to determine. But it was something that was in my household. My kids were very little, and the oldest was 4 at the time, 5 when it was completed. But he did have a therapist that I took him to, a place that he could express whatever it was that he was dealing with, you know, whether it was at my home or whether it was at daddy's home. And growing up with that conversation of therapy at the forefront and normalizing it. Because we go to the doctor for so many specialists. Why not go to the doctor for the heart? I'm not a doctor for the heart. I'm just mommy. You want chicken nuggets? You want, you know,
Right.
you want bagel bites? Like, that's what I'm good for. Let me kiss your boo-boo. I can't help with matters of the heart when I
Right.
was dealing with my own matters of the heart and needing to have that space.
And a neutral party, I believe, someone that you tell your kids that they can trust them, and that neutral party, I think, really allows the kids, because my kids went to therapy, so I'll speak into it. Let's be real. We played musical therapy chairs because we had to, you know, dad going, mom going, we were going together. Every week was a different situation. But it really helped because that neutral party gave my kids the coping skills that I couldn't teach them because they were going through whatever they were going through, and they needed their own outlet, somebody that they can identify with, and they gave them those strategies and coping skills and tools to have in their toolbox to be able to navigate that situation that, as a parent, like you just said, you were going through your own situation. I was going through my own. So 100% advocate for therapy. I think it's a great opportunity for kids to have that option.
Yeah, and I think too it's a great foundation to lay for them to have that normalization, because a couple years ago in 2020 when the pandemic shut down and
Sure.
you know the state of the world at that time, and then here in America in particular, we went through the time of social justice upheaval. You know, it impacted my boys greatly as well as Black American boys. And having that foundation of having to say, you know what, I do need to speak to someone, and it's not you. Who can we speak to? You know, it's finding at that time, because now they are teenagers, they needed a different therapist than they had when they were 5, you know, at 5, and finding that right person, but they were open to the process because they knew what benefits they were that would come out of it, and having that as an outlet for them, and you know, making that avenue open and possible for them. So it's ongoing. It's an ongoing tool that when they're adults and things aren't right, whether it's business partnerships, relationships, whatever it may be, they have that space.
And I'm grateful you did that, because I know you said in your country, it wasn't very common, because when you spoke to your mom or something, you know, it was kind of like, what is that about, or something, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, my parents' generation and growing up in South Africa, you never aired your dirty laundry out in public. You dealt with it in-house, and, you know, there is truth to that. You do deal with whatever said issues, and you do deal with it at home.
Sure.
But dealing with it at home also means having an outlet to have those private conversations in a safe space where someone can help you navigate and untangle what's reality, what is just made up in your head, what story you're telling yourself about it, and really getting down to the root of it, because every issue as an adult, unfortunately, is traced back into our childhood as trauma or something that was not resolved at that point, that shows its head in a different way as an adult. So when I did have the conversation with my mom, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go to therapy. She's like, what, you don't need therapy? I'm like, yeah, I do, because I don't know what I'm doing, and I need something to help clear my head. I'm sure as hell not going to clear myself, you know, and I'm grateful that I did it because of what it paved the way for.
Absolutely. I love the word she used, untangle those stories in our brain, right? Because we get, going through a divorce, you get all these different stories showing up.
This brings up something really interesting, and that is that some of the higher level business coaches will suggest that people have an exit strategy for their business, right? So that they know when they reach a certain point that they will sell or whatever they're going to do. And it seems like, you know, the word prenup is kind of a bad word in some cases, because then people start attacking it and saying, well, then you're not really in love and all those kinds of things. But it seems like at least when children start showing up, that there needs to be some kind of exit strategy that is put together before all the emotions kick in. And then it would be easier to deal with. And if the, I would say that if both parents, I'm going to say especially the father, actually loves his children, he would want to make sure they were provided for. So that would go into creating some kind of an exit strategy. And nobody will want to talk about that because it's not romantic.
I was going to say,
right?
who's going to want to talk about that?
It's going to kill the whole thing. But but if you don't do it, then you start doing it when you are at the peak of your emotions, and you are most likely to make the most mistakes in terms of trying to settle something, because then you just want it over. You want it to be done, you want to get out, you want them to get out, you want something else to happen. And again, it's like, we'll probably get like hate mail for this now. But you don't have to say it's love or not. Like, a exit strategy doesn't mean you don't love the person. Maybe it actually means you do. And it's just a change in perception, and maybe that's what people need to start looking at now.
You say exit strategy, and truth be told, before I even got to the point of saying those words, I want a divorce, or this is done, this is over, I had been in intense therapy for 2 years prior.
Right.
And in that, because it was for me, something wasn't right for me, and I won't go into what led down to the breakdown of the marriage. It's a show for another day. But I wanted to know what my responsibility was in it, and most importantly, how do I learn from this and not repeat the same mistakes moving forward? And it was during those 2 years that things became clearer as I started untangling, as I discovered the trauma that was underneath, that made sense. Well, of course I made these decisions, and where I am right now. So I made sure that I was in a healthy place to say I want a divorce, but I also did my research. As the second year was nearing and I was planning that exit, I didn't call it the exit strategy, but I knew that if this is where I was going to end up, steps needed to be in place. It's just how my brain works. And another level for me that added a flavor of extra complexity was, at the time, I was still going through my immigration process.
Right, that's another layer of
and
challenge.
as an immigrant going through immigration process, you got to know your rights. You got to know what resources are there for you. How does this implicate that? So I needed to do research on how do I end this chapter and not compromise this process. So I had to dig into research, and that's why in the book I speak about the immigrant community who sometimes are held captive because they don't know their rights. And they don't know what free resources that are out there when you're a legal resident in this country, So that was one piece. And then during that time frame, as that therapy was winding up, and I knew that this is where this was going, this was the only way out for me, someone confident in my circle who has since passed said to me, if this is where your head is at and this is where you're going, then you should think ahead of setting up a separation agreement and make sure you know all your numbers. So in other words, don't play ostrich with your finances.
Right. Very important.
You have to know what bills are what's coming in, what's going out, where's everything. And it's not a case, because often when someone is the breadwinner, the paying of the bills usually falls to that person. No. It needs to be a shared joint venture. Both people need to know, and especially if the person is the homemaker. Nowadays dads are in that role as well. It's not just exclusively to moms, but the homemaker needs to know that role too. It's pivotal. And that's how I was able to plan my exit strategy, was getting that separation agreement drawn up, knowing what it would take to pay the rent, the this and the that and the that, knowing where things were what. And when those words eventually came out and it was said, there's a small window, and you touched on it, Lynn, where emotions are raw, but they are also, it's a vulnerable state on both sides.
Sure.
Where you feel that, oh my God, this is ending. This, like, there's a sense of loss. There's a sense of almost remorse, in a sense. It's temporary before those raging emotional hormones kick in when you realize what's about to go down. But that window is really key for talking out that exit strategy.
Strategy.
Thank you. Strategy. If you haven't yet done so, that would be the time to, when you're in that lament phase of, oh my God, I can't believe this is, are we really going to do this? And that's when you talk. Okay, well, if we're going to do this, what is in the best interest of everybody?
Exactly.
How do we support? How do you support? How do I support? What is in the best interest if there are children involved? Because they're the ones that are going to suffer the most. We're adults.
That's it.
We get to handle our emotions, but the kids don't. They only know outbursts. And kids at that stage, if they are young or whether they're old, they pick up the frequencies like a radio station.
Absolutely.
They may not have the words if they are young,
feel
like
it.
mine couldn't articulate, but they tuned in. And on the days when Mom was just at the height of, I have nothing left in the tank, they would act like little demon children, and then they knew exactly when Mom just needed a break to be consoled and hugged, and they would tune in to that. And be a little gentler, and not so wild and crazy. I had boys, so they were wild all the time, but, gotta love them. They're now young teenagers. But yeah, great time to discuss that, what that exit strategy looked like. And I would be remiss if we don't talk about co-parenting.
Yes, very
Because,
important.
oh my Lord, does that take on so many layers. Whatever stage you start at is not where you end at. Because the kids go through different phases. We as adults are evolving through this process too. And it just adds layers, layers, and layers of having to be the bigger person or take the higher road and, pardon me, deal with co-parenting. That's a whole animal unto its own.
I love how she spoke into how they are now, you are actually have a great co-parenting connection as far as when the kids are involved, you can be at the same event or you can have a good time, because I know you've since remarried. I don't know where he's at, but I know that you can now have that type of connection again with like a family.
Yeah, it took a while.
Sure.
It took a while. In a divorce, there's always someone, usually the person who initiated it, a little further along, and then the other one, kind of plays catch up. But as they playing catch up, there are some hairy years that are real. And we went through hairy years. We really went through, just ugly, hairy years. Thankfully, it was short-lived, and we are at a point now where we can do celebrations together and, graduations together, or even holidays together, so that the kids don't feel mom's off, dad's off, mom's off, dad's off.
That's the worst.
And I'm remarried. My ex is remarried as well, and we do co-parent well with both parents as step-parents.
Nice.
On what is central to the kids.
Good.
Now, do personalities clash? Of course they do. We're human.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it is, okay, is this a me thing? Is it a you thing? Or what's going to be best for the child at hand? And it always lands on, okay, let's get unified on the child and what discipline steps we are taking forward. Because one thing I'm very grateful for that we decided early on is, if there was any disciplinary action or consequences is what we call them in home, it was in both homes.
Okay.
So the consequence would play out in my home, and it will also play out in the dad's home.
For the consistency.
For the consistency, because kids play you like a fiddle really quick.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
it's like,
I
oh, but
know
daddy said, oh, he did? Okay, 1 second.
Of course.
Yeah. No. Oh, because he didn't say.
Okay. You're right.
You know, oh, your mommy said, okay, sure, I'll call. No. So yeah, we and even to this day, in fact,
Right.
one of the kids is on some consequences. It happens in both homes
Right.
for that consistency from day one.
Yeah, that's important. Quick thing I have to say about this book, what I loved about it is her flavor of her personality came out with her little, like, not sarcastic, her humor, let's say, the humor, and you added humor to it because it could be a heavy subject. So you added your humor to it and you added your flavor, and I was reading the book and I heard your voice in my head as I was reading it. I was like, this is great. I love it.
You know, one of my favorite pieces of advice that you give in the book is toward the end, where you're cautioning people to not get out into the dating world too quickly, because you haven't really resolved the things you need to resolve, and you're just going to continue whatever it is you did with the next person. And that's not going to work either. And so then you're just going to create this string of broken relationships.
Yeah, a string of kissing frogs and toads before you find your Prince Charming. So yeah, you got to go through a few frogs and a couple toads before you get there. And it certainly isn't right after your divorce when you're still trying to walk with fresh legs, fresh eyes, fresh wings. Like, you're still trying to find what your strut is, what your groove is, what you like. It's just smell the flowers, but don't pick them all and bring them home. Just keep smelling. When you find an exotic one, okay, fine, but limit that.
Real quick, I love what she said
Yeah.
one thing about your soulmate could walk by and you were like, you don't even know your own soul. How you gonna know
Yeah,
your
that
soul?
was good. So Janice, what would you like to share with our audience about what you have coming up or some things you're involved in?
Yeah, thank you. So coming up, gosh, I can't believe it's almost October, which is this weekend, so we're pretty much in October.
Yep.
So for the new year, something that I've been working on for quite some time is a podcast, Just Dialogue. So that will be coming out in the new year. And then I have another book that I've written, and I have actually tasked Lynn, and hoping to launch that in the new year as an editor. That's called That Small Girl in Me. And then I do coach privately on the side. I have women's groups that I walk through, the divorce and the single mom. It's a curriculum that I take women through, six-week course, taking up the core constructs and just taking it a little more intimate and walking through that practical part as well in a smaller group session.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great.
That is great. Thank you so much for
sharing. This has been so helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank
you. She gets to be on the circuit somehow, somewhere, just teaching what you know from your experience. She gets to share all that.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. And Louise, would you like to share with our audience what we have coming up next week?
Next week we have Brajesh Singh. And he wrote the book, The Straw That Broke the Camel's Back, and a great book. I actually read it really quickly, and I'm excited for him to share how he healed himself from his back issues that he had for 8 years. So it's exciting. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So we are so grateful for your tuning in and watching our show.
Yeah.
And we will do this again next week.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next week. Even if you have never written a book, you are still an author. In fact, we all are. In every moment, each of us is writing our own unique story that we call our lives. Because many of us are, as in the lyrics of the Dan Hill song, Sometimes When We Touch, writers still trapped within our truth. If this is you, why not start writing your thoughts in a journal? It will help you get your truth on paper and could just be the start of your own book. And don't forget to join us here every week for the next edition of The Editor's Desk.